Welcome to Fridays with Coco. Gouda and I were just admiring these wonderful flowers, and no, we didn't pick them out of our garden. In fact, they are wooden and were a gift from our very dear friends Nora and John after they had come back from a trip to, well, someplace where tulips are very famous, among other things. Through the ecumenical prayer cycle in which we pray for all of God's children in 1 year, naming a few countries each week, this week we will be praying for people who live in France, Germany, and Monaco, right around here in this part of Coco's beach ball globe. Let's begin with a reading of Matthew, chapter 17, verses 1 through 9. Yeah, you can wave. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain. Jesus was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "It is good for us to be here. If you wish, we will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While Peter was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the Beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You heard it here. We have heard, and we will tell the story. Of course, Coco has written a poem for you. The title of Coco's poem is Consolation. Hold it from above. Okay, no, you can still look. Mice. The morning dawns with the rising sun, letting us know a new day has begun. As I look to the east, I already know there's a shadow behind me that's long and low. When the clock's hands point up, my shadow is below, and there's warmth from the sun with its bright, bright glow. As the day lengthens, I look eastward once more. My shadow is in front of me. I know not what for. Must this looming darkness always follow me? Will it chase me forever and not let me be? Then I realize, I become aware, I was the one who put it there. I admit that I am still a little green in knowledge of some of the things I have seen. But if light creates a shadow, then good it must be. And to continue living, I can now be free. So if you and I should stand together, our shadows will merge in all kinds of weather. We'll help each other through difficult days and know that love heals us in all sorts of ways. By the way, when is Groundhog Day? I don't know exactly. I don't always remember. But I'm guessing it would be a good day for the groundhog to go get a cleaning at the dentist's office. Thank you, Coco. And even though, they always seem to know right away what it is you're doing to connect your poem to the scripture, I always seem to keep going anyway. And today, well, would you just hold on to this? Good, thank you. There it is. Today is the 6th in a series of 8 videos in which the mice and I, they do seem to be all over the place, are sharing bits and pieces of our recent travels to 8 European countries. Today, Holland, a country that is famous for tulips, windmills, canals, and, as the mice would remind me, cheese. Let's go to the BTW basket of Holland Picks to learn more, much more about historical places, people, and creatures. I'll just hold these up a little in case you can't quite see them from wherever you are. You do know that you can watch these videos on TV. Just shoot us an email if you're not sure how to do that. Okay, go ahead. Somehow, I hope these guests will speak enough that Gouda can hear and I can hear. By the way, number 1, my name is Arabella. Whenever I hear such dramatic parts of the Bible, I think how we're living in the shadow of the cross. By this I mean we live in the center. The shadow can come from behind, it can come from in front of us, or from any side. The Matthew reading is the one we associate with the transfiguration of Jesus, the event where God revealed that Jesus is truly the Son of God, spoken in God's own voice, which is something that rarely occurs in the New Testament. And then Jesus tells the others not to speak about this until after his resurrection. Even then, they were living beneath the shadow of the cross. And even now, we're living beneath the shadow of the cross. In other words, we're never away from the cross. For it's almost impossible to drive through a town without seeing a church with a cross on top of it, or people wearing crosses. Speaking of Holland, I guess we were. Go ahead. Speaking of Holland, just like crosses, it's almost impossible to drive along the Dutch countryside and not see a windmill. I don't think anyone knows how many have ever been built over the years, but the people of Holland are proud that over 1,000 are still extant. Originally, they were designed as water pumps to remove unwanted seawater from the land. But they were also used as machine, motor kinds of things to grind grain. And who doesn't like to take advantage of energy that basically is free? They're also used to communicate by the way the blades point. An owner can indicate things like being away from home or even being in a period of mourning. All this from something that provides energy and power from the invisible, from wind. If you ask me, and I notice you didn't, I think invisible wind is what gives me energy and power. I just call it the Holy Spirit. Well, I can tell you there's a lot of wind around here most of the time, but I think it's coming from the animals, and that's a whole other subject and movie that I think we'll just not get any further into today. Okay, you hold on over there. Oh, this one is looking like, well, it's got some kind of a spire, but there's kind of a hole in the middle of the building too. By the way, number 2, my name is Kevin. I've never been to Holland, but everything I've ever heard about it convinces me it must be a truly enchanting place. Last night, when all of us guests arrived here in South Florida, we heard Rev David talk about visiting Holland last fall, of course with the mice, and how much they loved staying in a hotel that was built around the year 1300. Wow, that's really old. He explained how the small town of Elberg, only about a mile square, was built with walls to keep out water from the sea. For hundreds of years, the main occupation was sea fishing. But then the Zuiderzee was closed off, which meant the bay no longer had salt water. So the fishing industry literally dried up. Perhaps the most significant thing to happen in any recent history was the town's refusal to allow a railroad and railroad station to be built somewhere around the mid-1800s. And that caused the town to stop growing. As a result, it's an incredibly well-preserved and beautiful Middle Ages town with just 4 gates to go in or out, and with narrow streets barely wide enough for cars to pass each other. In case any of you were wondering where today's Matthew reading took place, I can assure you it wasn't Holland, because there are no mountains there. And the mountain Jesus went up was an important feature of the reading, like a climb into the clouds and out of sight. For those of us who have ever lived near or spent time on mountains, we know how various land formations create shadows, something mountains always do. Yes, they do, and it's usually colder in the shadow of the mountain as well, which might be why I left the land of green mountains and many cows that some people call, well, I forget what state it is. It's been a long time. Okay, so here we have a picture of a church, which you can see through the trees, and a very tall tower also. By the way, number 3, my name is Schuyler. I had an opportunity to travel to Holland several years ago and loved visiting the town of Delft, which is known for a porcelain painted in blue and white, as well as other colors. I've also read a lot about Delft and know it was the first city in Holland to have mandatory paid vacation days, holidays, and pensions back in the 1880s. And the owner of the biggest business in town built housing for the workers and schools for the children. Talk about generosity. One of the things that always fascinates me about Holland is how it is, as Kevin emphasized, very flat, and how much one is aware of this because it's possible from quite far away to see the shape of one particular building rising up from the flat horizon. A church. It's as if humans always think of having a high point wherever they live, even if it's only a building and not a mountain. And in many Dutch towns, there is only one church. Everyone goes to the same church. Now that's pretty inspiring. Get this, Delft is big enough to have 2 churches. One is called the Old Church, one is called the New Church. The Old Church was built in 1049, and the New Church is really quite new because it was built in 1351. Does that sound new to you? And here we are at that amazing place called, how can we be at, by the way, number 4 already? And yet we are. So here's some kind of a picture of an orb where it looks like the person is drawing himself in the orb, can see himself in the orb. I don't know, that's kind of different. Let's find out a little more about that. Go ahead. By the way, Number 4, my name is Kyler. I've never been to the Netherlands, but some of my ancestors came from there, so I'm all in when it comes to learning more. My life was profoundly impacted when I became acquainted with the artwork of M.C. Escher, someone who lived from 1898 until 1972. There is a museum devoted to Escher's work in The Hague, not far from Amsterdam. Rev David told us that he visited there last fall and saw many displays that really brought Escher's graphic artwork to life because one experiences it in a three-dimensional way instead of just a picture in a book. Escher was a master at doing the mathematics of figuring out how to create optical illusions and doing it so that he could then have two-dimensional drawings. And he did it in such a way that the viewer doesn't feel tricked by it, but only wants to see more. So I asked this question. When Jesus went up that mountain with Peter, James, and John, did any of them think they were being tricked because they saw both Moses and Elijah, who were most certainly long dead? I don't think so. Jesus often referred back to events that took place in the past, especially in the first 5 books of the Old Testament known as the Torah. And this passage is there with a reference to the times that the people were looking for the new Moses, because this would be the Messiah and lead the people of God. The long story short is that those who knew Jesus were familiar with the ways he was a teacher, healer, and prophet, but not always as the Son of God. Their witness to this event brought about a turn in historical events for them, and of course for us, because we live on this side of the Easter story. And this last one, can you tell what that is just by looking at the picture? Speaking of needing it in 3D, let's find out. By the way, number 5, my name is Ilsa. This morning, Rev David shared about arriving at a hotel in Haarlem late at night. A nice enough hotel with plenty of lighting, but he had a surprise the next morning because in the ceiling of the spiral staircase was a stained glass skylight. Isn't it a funny thing with stained glass windows and skylights? Depending on which side one is standing, the stained glass may not get to show off its splendor. In this case, Rev David didn't even notice until he was on the inside with the sun shining from the outside. At night, it's from the dark outside that one can see the light coming from the inside and appreciate the stained glass window. I think the light of Christ is a kind of light that's even brighter than the bright cloud written about in Matthew. The light of Christ is the kind where it doesn't matter where one stands, for the light is always there. Isn't it amazing? You should come by on Thursday nights when all these guests are arriving and Coco is figuring out what each one of them is going to do. And we were mentioning about Escher, and I have a jigsaw puzzle here, it's still wrapped in the cellophane, so it isn't done yet. But it's about a waterfall, and if you follow the waterfall, it keeps falling and falling and falling, but eventually starts back at the beginning. So I guess it's ever falling. I had seen this many, many years ago and loved this one so much for many reasons, and had hoped that I might get like a t-shirt of this to wear. But then when I saw the jigsaw puzzle, I thought, well, puzzles and Escher kind of go hand in hand. So here it is, and maybe one of these days we shall put the thing together. Thank you, Gouda. Gouda's a great help, but always expects a little cheese reward in the end. I've been inspired by the works of M.C. Escher, who Kyler shared with us, and I just shared about the crossword puzzle, the jigsaw puzzle, for many years. And so it was important in going to the Netherlands to be able to go to the Escher Museum, which is in The Hague, and that's just a short distance from the major hub of Amsterdam. Our days in the Netherlands were really packed, and actually had an opportunity to play about 24 historic Dutch organs, which is a lot. It kind of got a little blurry at some point, but then when I see the pictures, it brings each one back again. Certainly, he took care to carve out time in The Hague just for a couple of hours to be able to go to the Escher Museum. And I got to see things there that I hadn't seen in any of the picture books that I have. But what made a real impression on me is that Escher often created a drawing, an amazing drawing, and gave it to someone on the front of a handmade birthday card. Well, it's not surprising that people would hang on to those, but what was so wonderful is how many of those people had made it their business to give their own birthday card from Escher to the Escher Museum, and that would mean that all of us would get to enjoy them anytime we want to just go there. There is a lot of light created by something in those precious birthday cards. It's a way that brought light to Escher in making it, and the joy of giving it. The light to the ones receiving the cards, and the ongoing light to those of us who can now see them. Coco taught us in her poem, with the critter that needs to go to the dentist, a lot about shadow and light, and how they really play into our lives on a daily basis. Here's one little passage from there. But if light creates a shadow, then good the shadow must be, and to continue living, we can now be free. We can choose to think of light as good and darkness or shadow as not so good or not good at all, or we can accept that with the light of Christ in our lives, there is no darkness at all, just no darkness. Whatever has less light simply helps to emphasize the real light that is in our lives. The Matthew reading has so much emphasis on the transformative power of light that came from a bright cloud. And as we heard, it was God's way of telling us that Jesus is the Son of God. And for one of the few times in the New Testament, we actually read it as being God speaking in that moment, using words that could be heard by the person who needed or the others around who perhaps also needed. God certainly knows. By the way, number 6, Groundhog Day. Every year, I have to look up on the computer to remind myself when Groundhog Day is. I always get confused. Is it February or March? Is it the first day or the second day or the third Tuesday or whatever it is? And which is it, if the groundhog sees the shadow or doesn't see the shadow? And you know what? I looked it up this year. I can't remember now because of my short-term memory issues. And I don't think it really matters. Only the light of Christ matters. For that's the one we can see in each other. And perhaps that brings us back to Groundhog Day again. Not so much the day itself, but the movie Groundhog Day. Coco asked right at the end of her poem, by the way, when is Groundhog Day? The movie answers that. Every day. It must be that every day has something to do with light and shadows. And God blesses us with our days, with our time on earth, to ever be receiving the joy of the light, and the light that is emphasized even more by seeing the shadows. For today's meditation music, we've selected a piece that is a lullaby written by Charles, spelled like Charles but pronounced Charles Huffman. And Charles was someone who was born in Prague, but at a young age went to the Netherlands and spent the rest of his life there, and that's where he did all of his composing. And this piece, it's quite a long piece, and so we apologize, but we're going to play a kind of a shortened version of. Okay, one last look at the groundhog. We'll be making an appointment with the dentist. That ought to be quite a trip, I think. Okay, and oh, there's Zoe, the snowy owl, on the piano bench. So we talked about those things in Coco's poem and how she explained that sometimes the light is behind us and the shadow is in front of us, and at high noon when the hands of the clock are that the shadow would be kind of underneath us. What must it be like to be an owl where you can actually turn your head around so that you can see where the shadow is coming from without really changing the shadow? Maybe sometime I could be an owl for a couple of hours, and if I find out the answer to that question, I'll let you know. All right, see if you can help out, either by helping or staying out of the way. your wings. Close your eyes. Let us pray. Gracious God, thank you for Jesus, the true light, and the true vine who connects us all, those we know and those we have not met. Thank you for how the words in Matthew speak so clearly that Jesus is the Son of Man, the long-awaited Messiah. As we show reverence for life and pray for all of your children and creatures, we give thanks that all of us are sisters and brothers, friends as Jesus calls us friends, and we especially lift up those who live in France, Germany, and Monaco, who you know each by name. We lift up all with any health issues, all who are caregivers, and all who are transitioning from this life to the next, either alone or with loved ones. Thank you for giving us Jesus, by whose living, dying, and rising to new life assures us that we too are promised that new life. As faith-filled people, keep us filled with your holy gifts of hope, peace, love, and joy. God, for all that has been, we say thanks. For all that will be, we say yes. We say thanks and yes in the name of the one who gave himself completely for us, Jesus. Amen. Still facing that way. And may God bless you today. Amen.